Are you ready to learn a fun binding tutorial? So this is how to finish your binding. So I've sewn my binding all the way around my quilt, and I have this end and this end, and I've got to join them. So this is a tutorial on how to join your binding ends. So you lay your first strip. So this is the one that I started with, and you can see I left quite a lot of it loose. You can see here it's still attached. This is where I started sewing, was way over here. And with bigger quilts you can leave a bigger strip. Sometimes with my smaller quilts I only have about this much to play with, but the more that you have, the easier it is to do this little finishing trick. Now this is my other side that I have stopped it about here, and I have a really long strip, but I always give myself lots of extra binding just in case. And I'm going to lay my quilt as flat as I can. And I'm going to lay this first piece here, and then the second piece is going to go on top of it. Now the first thing that I will do is I'm going to cut a little bit off of that bottom piece, and I'm going to open it. So this is a 2.5 inch binding, and I'm going to place one edge right where the edge is there. And then I'm going to take this second binding piece that I need to join, and I'm going to lay it on top. Then I'm going to draw a line where the edge of this cut off piece of binding fabric is. Okay, so let's do that again. I have my first binding piece that I started with. This is the start of my binding that went around the quilt. I cut a little piece off the end, placed it where these two edges line up, took the second piece of binding where my quilt binding is finishing, and I'm going to lay that on top. Now you want to make sure these are nice and smooth, but you don't want them pulled too tight. And then you're going to draw a line. I'll see my line moved a little bit because I had to adjust this over here. This is sometimes a little cumbersome with a really big quilt. Now I'm going to cut on that line. So basically what I have done is I have created a 2.5 inch overlap between the beginning and the end of my binding. Now I'm going to take this piece that's coming from the beginning and turn it this way. And I'm going to take this piece, open it, and I'm going to turn it this way. And this is why the more room you have to work with, the easier, because I'm now going to overlap these two guys. So that the binding that was at the end is coming from the top angle, and the binding that was at the beginning is coming in this way, and they are right sides together. And I'm going to place a couple of pins here and here. Because what I'm going to do next is I'm going to sew from this point to where this point is. So I'm going to draw a line so you'll see where I'm going to sew. So I'm basically sewing that diagonal, and that's going to join my two ends together. Now, one thing that I will do is I will use some little wonder clips to just kind of clip this extra bulk out of the way so that I can easily manipulate these two pieces. All right, so I have sewn my two pieces. I'm gonna pull my little clip out. And one thing that I like to do to make sure that I did it right, now I'm gonna pull my pins out. And you can see when it pulls closed, it has a pretty diagonal join, just like all the rest of your binding. Before I trim this little part off, I do like to pull and make sure that I did sew it right and that it's not too short or too long. And I can see that it's going to work really nicely, so I'm going to go ahead and cut these little corners off, and then I will press these open and then press this back. So I will press this with my iron just to make it nice and flat, and then I will pick up my stitching right here, and then I will finish stitching all the way across. All right, so here you can see this is where I started my stitching again, and now my binding is on there. You can see where my join is. It blends in just like all the others. It doesn't look different or weird or have lots of extra fabric because I've overlapped anything. It looks just like all the other parts of my binding. And then there you can see where I finished off. I'm going to trim that up and then it's good to go.